The envelope was light in my hands, but what it contained was the heaviest insult I'd ever received. Inside, a plastic bag with a single goldfish swimming in circles. No note, no explanation. Just a damn goldfish worth maybe $2 after I'd handed my twin brothers the keys to a $6 million fishing operation that took me 45 years to build. The business my father started with a single trawler, the legacy I'd expanded into the most respected fleet in the Gulf of Maine. Gone. All of it. When I signed over that fleet to my brothers last year, people called me crazy. "Bobby," they said, "those twins haven't worked an honest day since high school." But blood is blood, I thought. Family looks after family. That's what Dad always preached. What a joke that turned out to be. 3 months after I transferred everything, they'd sold every boat, every permit, every piece of equipment. Decades of sweat and sacrifice liquidated in 90 days. And all I got in return was this goldfish in a sandwich bag, mailed in a padded envelope from some resort in Florida where they were spending my money. This is the story of how I built an empire from nothing, gave it away to the wrong people, and what I did when I discovered just how deep their betrayal really went. I grew up in Gloucester, Massachusetts, where fishing isn't just a job, it's in your blood. My father, James Callahan, started with one struggling trawler he named Mary's Promise, after my mother. Dad was tough as barnacles, up at 3 a.m. every day, hands permanently cracked and calloused from hauling nets and wrestling with the sea. He taught me everything about fishing, about respecting the ocean, about working until your bones ached. The twins, Mark and Mike, came late in my parents' life, surprise additions when I was already 15. Everyone called them the boys, while I was always just James Boy. From the beginning, they were treated differently. Mom doted on them, and even Dad, who never spared me any criticism, seemed to soften around them. I remember when I was 17, Dad took me out during a nor'easter to secure a loose mooring. The waves were crashing over the pier, and I slipped, dropping his favorite gutting knife into the harbor. He made me dive for it 3 times in January waters until I found it. When I finally climbed back aboard, blue-lipped and shivering, he just said, "A real fisherman doesn't make excuses, he fixes his mistakes." Meanwhile, when the twins were teenagers and crashed Dad's truck after joyriding, he laughed it off as boys being boys. Despite everything, I worshipped my father. When he died of a heart attack on his boat when I was 25, I took over the business with a single-minded determination. The twins were only 10 then, and I promised Dad I'd take care of them. I worked 18-hour days, reinvested every penny, expanded our fleet from 1 trawler to 3, then 5, then 12. I developed relationships with the best restaurants in Boston, New York, even overseas buyers. I built cold storage facilities, got ahead of sustainability regulations, and paid for the twins' college educations. While I was building the business, Mark and Mike were building their reputations as the town charmers. They'd swing by the docks occasionally, slap backs, tell jokes, take credit for our family name while never lifting a finger. They both went to Boston College on my dime. Both dropped out after 3 years. Mark tried real estate for a while but couldn't stick with it. Mike had some scheme about importing exotic woods that fell apart when his partner disappeared with their investment money, which had actually been my investment money. Through it all, they remained the golden boys of Gloucester. Everyone loved their stories, their big personalities. The Callahan twins, people would say, those boys are going places. Meanwhile, I was the boring older brother, the workaholic with no life beyond the fleet. When my doctor found the shadow on my lung last year, I did what I thought Dad would want. I called a family meeting at the old house on Eastern Point where we grew up. I told the twins about my diagnosis, treatable but serious, and explained that I wanted to put everything in order. Then I presented them with the papers transferring ownership of Callahan Fishing Enterprises, 12 vessels, processing facilities, distribution contracts, everything worth about $6 million all told. This is Dad's legacy, I told them, and now it's yours to carry forward. I've taught the crew everything I know. They'll help you learn the business. The twins hugged me, tears in their eyes. Mark called me the best brother anyone could ask for. Mike swore they'd make me proud.
2 weeks later, they threw a huge party on the flagship vessel Mary's Destiny, named after the original boat. They invited the whole town, made a big speech about honoring their brother's and father's legacy. A month after that, they started selling everything off. I was halfway through my treatment when I first heard rumors about the fleet. I was staying with my daughter Sarah in Portland, focused on getting through each day of chemo, when my phone started lighting up with calls from Gloucester. At first, I ignored them. The business wasn't mine anymore, and I needed to concentrate on healing. But when Captain Rodriguez, who'd worked with me for 20 years, showed up at Sarah's doorstep unannounced, I knew something was wrong. "They sold the Mary's Destiny yesterday," he said, sitting at Sarah's kitchen table, turning his cap in his hands. "And the Gloucester Pride the week before. Word is they're selling all the boats, Bobby, the processing plant too." I didn't believe it at first. "They're probably just consolidating, maybe upgrading the fleet," I said, though a knot was forming in my stomach. Rodriguez shook his head. "They fired half the crew already, gave everyone 2 weeks severance, no matter how long they'd been with the company." I called Mark that night. He answered from what sounded like a party, music thumping in the background. "Bobby, how's the treatment going, brother?" His voice was artificially cheerful, slightly slurred. "I'm hearing things, Mark, about the boats." There was a pause, then a forced laugh. "Oh, that? Yeah, we're making some changes, streamlining operations. Nothing for you to worry about. You focus on getting better." "Put Mike on," I demanded. More background noise, muffled conversation. Then Mike's voice, clearer, more calculated. "Bobby, listen, the fishing industry is changing. Regulations, fuel costs, market competition. We're repositioning our assets for better returns. Business 101, right?" "Business 101 would be consulting with the captains who've run those boats for decades," I countered. "Or maybe letting me know you were planning to dismantle everything I built." "You gave us the business, Bobby," Mike said, his voice hardening. "That means we get to run it how we see fit. Look, I gotta go. We'll talk soon." They didn't answer my calls after that. By the time I finished my treatment 3 months later, the business was gone. Every boat sold, the processing plant converted to condos, the distribution network dismantled. 45 years of work liquidated in a financial fire sale. I drove back to Gloucester, still weak from the chemo, but fueled by a rage I'd never felt before. I went straight to the house on Eastern Point, the family home where the twins were now living. The driveway was filled with new cars, a Range Rover, a Mercedes convertible, and some sports car I didn't even recognize. Music was blaring from inside, the sound of laughter. I pushed open the door without knocking. The living room where I'd grown up, where Dad had taught me to tie fishing knots, had been transformed. Modernist furniture, abstract art on the walls, and about a dozen people I didn't recognize lounging around with drinks. The twins were holding court by the fireplace, Mark showing off what looked like vacation photos on a tablet, Mike mixing cocktails at a newly installed bar. They saw me at the same moment. Their smiles faltered for just a second before snapping back into place. "Bobby!" Mark exclaimed, handing the tablet to someone and coming toward me. "We didn't know you were coming. You should have called." I stood there, taking in the scene. My father's prized ship model, which had always sat on the mantel, was gone. In its place was some kind of modern sculpture. "Where is it?" I asked quietly. "Where's what?" Mike asked, approaching with a drink extended toward me. "Here, have a bourbon. You look like you could use one." I ignored the glass. "The model of Dad's first boat. Where is it?" The twins exchanged a glance. "Oh, that old thing," Mark said dismissively. "We put it in storage. Didn't really match the new aesthetic."
along with all the old family photos. I noticed now that the walls had been stripped of the pictures that had always hung there. Fishing trips with Dad, Mom's birthday celebrations, images of our family history. "Bobby," Mike said, his voice lowered, guiding me toward the kitchen away from their guests. "You're making a scene. We can talk about the redecorating later." In the kitchen, completely renovated with gleaming appliances that had never cooked a fish stew, Mark joined us, closing the door. "What happened to the fleet?" I demanded. "To the crews?"
To families that depended on those jobs? Business decision, Mike said flatly. The ROI on fishing operations is terrible compared to other investments. We did you a favor, Mark added. You were running the business on nostalgia, not numbers. We got top dollar for everything. Well, almost everything, he chuckled. And what about Dad's legacy? What about the promises you made? Mike rolled his eyes. Dad's been dead for 30 years, Bobby. And promises? Come on. You wanted out, we took over. That's business. And the crews? I pressed. Got their severance, Mark shrugged. Not our problem anymore. Look, we've got guests. Why don't you come back tomorrow when you're calmer? I felt something break inside me then. Not my heart, something harder, something that had been holding back the truth about my brothers for decades. Where's my share? I asked quietly. Your share, Mike laughed. You gave us the business, remember? Signed it all over. There are no shares anymore. You sold a $6 million operation, I said. Family looks after family. That's what Dad always said. The twins exchanged another glance, this one different, calculating, cold. Well, Mark said slowly, actually, we did set something aside for you. Mike smiled, walked to a drawer, and pulled out a padded envelope. It just arrived back from Florida today. We were going to mail it to you, but since you're here... I opened the envelope right there in our father's kitchen. Inside was a plastic sandwich bag filled with water, a single orange goldfish swimming in circles. No note, no explanation. I looked up at my brothers' smirking faces, and something clicked. The goldfish wasn't just an insult, it was a reference. When we were kids, Dad had built a small pond in the backyard. I'd stocked it with expensive koi fish I'd saved up for months to buy. One weekend when I was away on a fishing trip, the twins, then about 12, had drained the pond and sold my koi to a collector, replacing them with grocery store goldfish. They thought it was hilarious. Dad had made them return the money and apologize, but they never did understand why I was so upset. "This is it?" I asked, holding up the bag. "This is my share?" "Consider it a memento of the fleet," Mike laughed. "We named him Bobby Jr." Mark chimed in. "He's worth about the same as what you left us, a business drowning in regulations and outdated equipment." The kitchen door opened, and a woman peered in. "What's taking so long with those drinks, boys? Everyone's waiting." "Be right there," Mark called cheerfully. "Just catching up with our big brother." "Actually," I said, pushing past them toward the living room, goldfish bag still in hand, "I think I'll join the party." The twins scrambled after me, but I was already in the living room, standing in the center of their gathering. I recognized a few faces now, some local business owners, a couple of town council members, and several younger people who seemed to be hanging on my brother's every word and drink. "Excuse me," I said loudly, holding up the bag with the goldfish. The room quieted. "I'd like to make a toast." Mike grabbed my arm. "Bobby, don't do this." I shook him off. "My brothers just gave me this fish as my share of a $6 million fishing business I built over 45 years and handed to them while I was fighting cancer." The room went completely silent. A woman near the window set her drink down slowly. "I started working on my father's boat when I was 12, I continued. "Built it into the largest fleet in Gloucester. Gave my brothers everything, their education, their failed business ventures, their second and third chances. And when I got sick, I gave them the business because I believed family takes care of family."
I looked around the room, meeting the eyes of each guest. They sold everything in 3 months, fired crews who'd worked for our family for generations, and all I got was this goldfish. One of the town council members, Bill Harrington, stood up awkwardly. "Bobby, I had no idea. Mark and Mike told us you wanted out, that you'd agreed to a buyout." "There was no buyout," I said firmly. "Just a transfer of ownership and a betrayal." "That's not true," Mark interjected desperately. "Bobby's confused from his treatments. We had an arrangement." "What arrangement?" I challenged. "Show them the papers, Mark, the ones that say I get anything from the sale." Mike stepped forward, trying to salvage the situation. "This is a family matter we can discuss privately. Bobby's upset, understandably, but—" "I'm not upset," I interrupted. "I'm finally seeing clearly."
You know, Dad always had a saying about the twins. They could charm a fish onto a hook, but they never learned how to actually fish. I held up the goldfish bag again. Well, consider me hooked one last time. But here's something you don't know. Before I signed over the business, I had my lawyer add a clause, a condition of the transfer. If the business was substantially changed or liquidated within 5 years without my written consent, ownership of this house reverts to me. The twins' faces drained of color simultaneously. "That's not possible," Mike stuttered. "We had our lawyers review everything." "Your lawyers missed it," I said. "It's in subsection 8.3, paragraph 4. I made sure it was buried deep because I wanted to see if you'd actually read the documents or just grab what was being handed to you." I reached into my jacket and pulled out a folded document. "This is a notice of property reclamation, effective immediately. You have 30 days to vacate." The room erupted in murmurs. Mark lunged for the paper, but Bill Harrington, the council member, stepped between us. "Is this true, Bobby?" he asked quietly. "Every word," I confirmed. "And there's more. The sale proceeds from the fleet and facilities? A portion should have been held in trust for the employees' pension fund, another clause they missed. My lawyer will be contacting everyone affected tomorrow." I looked at my brothers, who were now huddled together, whispering frantically. "I never thought you'd actually sell everything. I included those clauses as insurance, hoping I'd never need them. I believed in you." What a mistake that was. I walked to the front door, then turned back one last time. "You can keep the goldfish. It's the only thing you've actually earned." As I stepped outside into the cool Gloucester evening, I heard the party breaking up behind me. Questions being fired at my brothers, their stammered explanations falling flat. For the first time since my diagnosis, I felt the weight lifting from my shoulders. Not because I'd reclaimed the house, material things meant little to me now, but because I'd finally broken free from the obligation I'd felt toward the twins my entire life. I climbed into my old truck and drove toward the harbor, where the lights of fishing boats still bobbed on the water. Boats that weren't mine anymore, but still represented the life I'd built and loved. The next morning, my phone wouldn't stop ringing. First, it was Captain Rodriguez, then practically every fisherman who'd ever worked for me. Word had spread through Gloucester like wildfire. The Callahan twins had been exposed, and Bobby was taking back what was his. I met my lawyer, Ellen Michaels, at her office overlooking the harbor. She'd been my friend since high school and had helped draft those hidden clauses I'd mentioned at the party. The truth was more complicated than what I'd revealed. "The house is definitely yours," Ellen confirmed, sliding papers across her desk. "That clause is ironclad. But the pension fund situation is trickier. We can argue they violated fiduciary duty by not setting aside those funds, but it will mean a court battle." "Whatever it takes," I said. "Those people worked their whole lives for my family." By noon, the twins had left 3 increasingly desperate voicemails. By evening, they were at Sarah's doorstep in Portland, where I was still staying. "You can't do this to us," Mark pleaded when Sarah reluctantly let them in.
That was, I corrected, until you sold off Dad's legacy for quick cash. Mike, always the more practical one, cut to the chase. What do you want, Bobby? There must be some arrangement we can make. I looked at my brothers, really looked at them. 53 years old, but still acting like entitled teenagers. It suddenly struck me how empty their lives were, despite all their charm and bluster. They'd never built anything meaningful, never committed to anything difficult. I want the truth, I said simply, starting with where the money went. The twins exchanged their familiar glance, but this time I caught something new in it. Fear. We invested most of it, Mike offered cautiously. In what? More hesitation. Finally, Mark sighed. It's gone, okay? We put it into a resort development in Florida. The developer took off with most of the cash. We've got maybe $500,000 left between various accounts. I wasn't even surprised. And the family heirlooms, Dad's ship models, Mom's jewelry, the photos? In storage, Mark assured quickly. We didn't sell those. We can get them back tomorrow. I nodded slowly. Here's what's going to happen.
You're going to sign over whatever's left of the money to a trust for the former employees. You're going to return every family item to the house. And then you're going to leave Gloucester. Leave? Mike looked stunned. This is our home. Was your home, I corrected again, until you decided family meant nothing. That's not fair, Mark protested. We made a business decision. No, I said firmly, you made a family decision, and it was the wrong one. They left without agreeing to my terms, but I knew they had no choice. The legal machinery was already in motion. The next day brought a surprise. Rodriguez called me down to the docks where a small crowd had gathered, former crew members, dock workers, people I'd worked with for decades. We heard what happened, Rodriguez said, standing beside a weather-beaten but solid fishing trawler I didn't recognize. This is the second chance. We pooled our savings and bought her at auction last month when your brothers started selling everything off. She's not much, but she's seaworthy. I stared at the boat, emotion tightening my throat. She's yours if you want her, Rodriguez continued, or ours together. We thought maybe Callahan Fishing could start again, smaller but smarter. For the first time since my diagnosis, I felt a flicker of the old passion. One boat, just like Dad had started with. It felt right somehow, like completing a circle. Within a week, the twins had surrendered. They signed over the remaining money, closer to $300,000 than the $500,000 they'd claimed, and returned the family heirlooms. Most importantly, they agreed to leave Gloucester. Last I heard, they were headed to Arizona to try their luck in real estate again. I moved back into the family home, restored Dad's ship model to its place of honor on the mantel, and rehung the family photos. But it felt different now. The house echoed with memories, but it was too big for just me. Then came the unexpected twist. While sorting through papers in Dad's old office, I found a sealed envelope addressed to my sons in his handwriting. Inside was a letter dated just a week before his fatal heart attack. Boys, it read, if you're reading this, I'm gone. Bobby will take care of the business. He knows fishing better than anyone. But remember this, a fleet is just boats. Family is what matters. Bobby's carried too much on his shoulders for too long. Whatever happens to the business, take care of each other. That's all that counts in the end. I sat there for a long time, the letter in my hands, thinking about what Dad would make of all this. He'd be disappointed in the twins, sure, but maybe in me too. I'd built the business, but forgotten what it was for, to support a family, not replace it. The next day, I made two decisions. First, I sold the Eastern Point house and bought a smaller place near the harbor. Second, I took the second chance out for her first fishing trip under new ownership, with Rodriguez and a small crew of the most loyal former employees. As for the Goldfish, I kept it, named it Reminder, and got it a proper tank in my new living room. Every time I feed it, I remember both the betrayal and the lesson it taught me.
6 months later, I got a postcard from Phoenix. No message, just the twins' signatures. I took it as an olive branch, a small one, but still. I didn't respond immediately. Some wounds take time to heal. But I did something that surprised even me. I set up a small trust fund for them, just enough to help if they ever truly hit bottom. Not because they deserved it, but because that's what family does. The real lesson in all this wasn't about punishment or revenge. It was about understanding that the business my father started and I built wasn't about the boats or the money. It was about providing security for the people you care about. The second chance isn't breaking any records, but she turns a profit. We fish sustainably, sell to local restaurants, and everyone who works with us owns a piece of the operation. It's smaller than what I had, but in many ways, it's better. My cancer has been in remission for 9 months now. Every morning, I walk down to the harbor before sunrise, just like Dad used to. Sometimes I think I see him in the mist that rises off the water, not disappointed, but nodding in approval. Not at the business, but at the understanding I finally reached. Legacies aren't about things we leave behind, but about the values we pass on. It's been 3 years since that goldfish arrived in the mail. Reminder is still swimming in his tank. Turns out goldfish can live a long time when properly cared for. I didn't respond immediately. Some wounds take time to heal. But I did something that surprised even me. I set up a small trust fund for them, just enough to help if they ever truly hit bottom. Not because they deserved it, but because that's what family does. The real lesson in all this wasn't about punishment or revenge. It was about understanding that the business my father started and I built wasn't about the boats or the money. It was about providing security for the people you care about. The second chance isn't breaking any records, but she turns a profit. We fish sustainably, sell to local restaurants, and everyone who works with us owns a piece of the operation. It's smaller than what I had, but in many ways, it's better. My cancer has been in remission for 9 months now. Every morning I walk down to the harbor before sunrise, just like Dad used to. Sometimes I think I see him in the mist that rises off the water, not disappointed, but nodding in approval. Not at the business, but at the understanding I finally reached. Legacies aren't about things we leave behind, but about the values we pass on. It's been 3 years since that goldfish arrived in the mail. Reminder is still swimming in his tank. Turns out goldfish can live a long time when properly cared for.
The second chance became 3 boats, then 5, a modest fleet, but all co-owned by the people who work them. Every crew member has health care, profit sharing, and a voice in how we operate. Last Christmas, I received a call from Arizona. The twins' latest venture had collapsed, and they were finally ready to talk, really talk. We're not close, probably never will be, but we're finding our way back to something resembling family. They're coming to visit next month. I've told them they can stay in my guest room, but they'll need to help on the boats if they want spending money. At 68, I've learned there's always time for second chances, but they have to be earned. As for that $6 million empire I built and lost and partially rebuilt, it taught me the most valuable lesson of my life. True wealth isn't measured by the size of your fleet or the money in your account. It's measured by the people who stand with you when the storms come, and in Gloucester, storms always come. If you've ever given your trust to someone who betrayed it, or sacrificed for family who didn't appreciate it, know this: you're not alone. But also know that the story doesn't have to end there. Sometimes losing everything is the only way to find what really matters. If you've found something valuable in my story, hit that subscribe button. I'm sharing a new chapter each week about the lessons I've learned from the sea and from life. Because the greatest comeback isn't about regaining what you lost. It's about discovering what you never knew you needed.